Welcome along to another edition of the Big Idea Show. Today we are talking about our changing relationships with money with Chartered Financial Planner Nathan Harris. So Nathan, why should they tune in?
Hi. Basically what we want to talk about is our changing relationship with money, the idea that sometimes what's going to be stressing you out at the moment with the way you save, or why can't you get to the next level with things, and trying to understand some of the biases that are going to be present for you so that you can tackle them and really take control and take ownership of money and stop it being such a scary, horrible word.
Good stuff. So if you want to change your relationship with money, stay tuned. Big Idea Show is up next. Welcome along to another edition of the Big Idea Show. Today I am joined by Nathan Harris, who is a Chartered Financial Planner. How's it going, Nathan?
Great, thank you.
Good. Thank you for joining me today for our conversation. We're going to be chatting, aren't we, about our changing relationships with money.
Yeah. Try and make it as fun as I can.
Absolutely. Well, I guess anything to do with money, it's something people are interested in, right? Whether they've got a good or a bad relationship, we all want to have a better relationship, don't we? And this isn't a subject that I particularly know much about, so I'm very much interested in kind of hearing about it. I'm interested, but I have no knowledge. So do you want to start us off? Kind of what's your interest in this subject, and kind of, I guess, what would be an overview that you say to people in terms of our changing relationships?
So I think the big thing I do is I generally advise individuals how to do it, and the people I generally would advise are 40s and 50s and above, and they've got quite a lot of money and need a lot of help managing that. But what I realised is that a lot of my friends in their 20s and 30s were actually getting to the point of getting to their late 30s and still not really knowing about their relationship with money or understanding it. And not knowing where to get advice from. And I thought, well, actually, there must be, there's obviously a change happening here, because I think a lot of people get their understanding of finance from their parents, probably. And the thing is, the generation before us, actually, their lifestyle, their experience is going to be completely different to somebody growing up these days. Different set of challenges and different way of working, and therefore to take your parents' idea about money wholesale is probably a little bit unrealistic. But how do you then sort of work out where you are positioned, and also understand what your biases are? So the way you think about money, you might not like credit cards, you might be anti-stock market, but you don't necessarily understand those, and you've taken those biases from places without necessarily understanding how it may help you.
And I think it kind of in coming up with the title, I think it was really, for me, and kind of by the sounds of it for you as well, this idea of the word relationship with money. You say biases, and it's funny, isn't it? We think of, well, money's money, money's an inanimate thing, but we have a hugely varying relationship as individuals, but as you're saying, kind of specifically based on our age and when we were brought up and all this kind of stuff. So what are some of the key, I guess, categories or the key challenges, and how they fall in the different categories of kind of ages, or kind of how populations would group themselves?
So I guess probably not an exhaustive list, but you've got the baby boomers, so the people that are, which was post-war, lots of children born, and they're now in their 60s and 70s. And they live through a fantastic growth in the economy. So what we're seeing is that they've got fantastic pensions. A lot of them have defined benefit schemes. They've got decent state pension that has a lot of guarantees from the government about it increasing each year. And the biggest thing is a lot of them were encouraged to buy houses. So they tend to own most of the houses and most of the buy-to-lets. So it's very difficult. There's a sort of shift in wealth, and at the same time, that generation is going to live a lot longer than previous generations. So you realise that in the good old days, everyone was very polite. They got to state retirement age, and they'd die within a couple of years and pass everything along to the next generation, which they can then invest themselves. That's not going to happen anymore. They're going to live for a much longer time, and they're going to want to spend their retirement doing some great things. So they need that income from it to do it. So I think that's the first group. And then after that, you're sort of getting towards the Generation X. So an idea coined by Douglas Copeland in one of his novels, and it's sort of the people that sort of born just before 1980, and they're generally quite disenfranchised, quite angry about missing out on a lot of the growth. And Generation Y is the one after, which is also sort of ended up being coined exennials, because you've got between Generation Y and there's also millennials. So you kind of coming back to this idea of digital natives and stuff. Where if you were born in sort of early 90s, you're very at home with it, all social media, all technology. Born in the 80s, you're pretty much there, but you're still considered a bit of a digital immigrant. So you're at home with all the technology and the change there, but you also know what a VCR and a tape machine are. So it's just seeing that change and understanding how that really will impact people. So each of those set have a different challenge. Maybe less so with the baby boomers. Their biggest headache is inheritance tax and worrying about that.
Oh dear.
And unfortunately, that's pretty much the situation. And there's a lot of wealth tied up, and that's why I think you see a lot of this phrase of bank of mum and dad, providing income, providing funds for the next generation to do that. But it's not. That's not a luxury for everyone, certainly. So we're seeing that sort of happen. Then you've got certainly with Generation Y and the exennials, they would have struggled to get on the housing market in time for that boom in the early 2000s. A lot of them actually would have got onto the housing market mid sort of 2005, 2006. I myself managed to buy, I think, about a month before the peak of the market, which was fantastic timing. So the problem there is that they weren't able to buy then, and since then the tightening of the mortgage rules, etc., and the need to have a larger deposit has made it more and more difficult to get on the housing ladder. So you're sort of seeing a shift now with that, with people being disenfranchised from it. They think, I'm never going to buy a house, so I don't really care. I'll use that to buy experiences, which is great. But if you do want to buy a house, actually it's realising that there are some things around that you can help yourself help get on with. And the other big change is that I think we're seeing a difference from previous generations were all cash based. So they'd money come in once a month, they'd pay their bills, and they'd know how much money they had left over. And a lot of the time it might be a cash economy. And now everything's digital. You can pay on your phone. Money's very quick to go in and out of the account. It's quite difficult to budget. And that skill of budgeting probably hasn't really been passed on quite as much as we're very comfortable taking on debt. And pretty much everyone's got a credit card, a store card, loan to buy a car, because it's easy money. It's something that our parents wouldn't have done, and certainly grandparents they would have no idea about this sort of thing at all. So it's just understanding there's a different set of pressures there, and I think we need to the both sides, the millennials need to understand sort of some of the issues that the baby boomers might be facing.
And that's gone.
I was just say, I guess the fear for them is running out of money. Because they're going to live a lot longer. And vice versa. I think a lot of people think, why can't the younger generation get on the housing market and do it? And it's just a changed thing. And then I guess it's our economy being split with different people of different ages, and trying to accommodate for all of them with the same solution isn't necessarily going to work, or being annoyed, as you said, why someone would behave a certain way or not be interested or be more interested than they would is going to cause conflict, right? Isn't it? And I'm interested, we'll come back to that a little bit more in kind of part 2 and 3, but I guess just to kind of wrap this up, so as you said, kind of you'll work a lot with people who kind of are a bit older, have earned money over those years, and are now going, right, what do I do with it? How do I protect it? How do I make the most of it? But what's your interest in
in kind of supporting those people that are below, like you said, those 40, 50-year-olds who are in this new generation. What was your where did the interest come for you?
Where did I get in for finance? I did basically. I was good at one thing at school, which was economics, and then it made sense to do that. And I did a degree in finance. I'm thinking I was going to be an investment banker, and I had to do a placement year, and I turned up to an interview with an independent financial advisor, which I kind of wasn't that keen on. And he turned up, the person interviewing me, in a Porsche. He was late 20s, and I thought maybe this has got some legs. But then actually, when I started working at that firm, I realised that actually I really value the contact with people. And actually being able to see it. As you said at the start, I think finance for a lot of people is a complete enigma. They don't know how it works, how the bits fit together. And whenever I look at somebody's financial situation, it's just a big jigsaw. And if I can show people how all the bits fit together and make it a plan, you can almost see the stress levels drop off them. And they're happy because they think, oh, okay, I can actually see how my future could look, and everything's going to be all right.
Okay. And I guess you probably see, not necessarily in a work context, but just general day to day, a lot of, like you said, those under 40s, those more youngsters with that stress of money. And like you said, no one's really giving them that much support or, advice or anything like that, really.
I think, exactly. I think mainly they just get a hard time. It's a case of where are you supposed to find enough money if you're renting? Rents are going up to save regularly. You really have to give up a lot of things to make that deposit happen for the average person. And I think the length of the time that you'd have to give things up it becomes a very difficult choice. So I can see that, and it's frustrating sometimes when you see that maybe people aren't aware of all the options that are available to them.
I guess especially if that advice is maybe coming from someone who's kind of say older or not in their same generation, so doesn't get why they, like you said about they just get a hard time. Well, you should just save, but like you said, it's completely different behaviour, different mindset as we're in the different groups. So
and I think just going back to people don't really until you've had a mortgage, you probably don't really understand how it works. So it's getting people to understand the logistics of it and why you can't borrow everything. And trying to understand that we're in a weird position at the moment that if you buy a house, your mortgage payments, even if it's a very low deposit, are going to be below what it costs to rent that house. So everybody's looking at going, well, it's obvious I should be allowed to buy a house because I can afford to rent it. But unfortunately, interest rates are very, very low, historically low levels. So they will go up at some point, arguably. So if they do rise, then suddenly being caught out and not being able to afford it, we don't want to get into a situation we've seen in previous downturns where people are losing their homes.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, right, we're going to take a quick break now, and then we're going to come back and chat some more about our changing relationships with money.
Excellent.
Welcome back, part 2, the Big Idea Show. Today we are talking about our changing relationship with money with Nathan Harris, Chartered Financial Planner. You've been telling us something about, I guess, the different generations and our different mindset and relationships with money based on when we were born, all that kind of stuff. So, as you said, we have different behaviours as a result. Is it a case of the different generations should change their behaviour, or is it that the world should change to accommodate different people and the environment that they've been kind of brought up in?
I think it depends what you want out of life. If you do want to have, say, buy a house, or you do want to save up for something, then there's a compromise there. And I think the difficulty is, I think a lot of people think they have to save, they're being forced to save everything and have no fun. But I think what needs to happen is people need to understand what they are spending their money on. Once you know that, you can then make some decisions. And also try and avoid poor decisions such as using credit cards to buy something and then never paying the credit card off.
Yeah.
It's this idea of gratification of when you buy something. Everybody's done it where they've said, "Oh, I really want the latest TV."
Yeah.
And they bought it and they spent quite a lot of money on it, but the benefit or the enjoyment they get from that is never quite as great as they think it's going to be.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, sometimes you just need to take, you want it, and you need to take a little bit of time to think, well, how much do I want that?
Yeah. So going back to your kind of, I guess, the different behaviours or mindsets of the different generations, would you say that would map parallel to how we value things? If you're saying if you haven't saved for it, you've just got it on credit.
Yeah.
Do you end up not valuing it as much because you haven't worked as hard for it?
I think there's an argument for that, because if it's if you have saved for it on a monthly basis and built that cash up, it does make a quite a big difference.
Yeah.
I think, and the ease of credit is just, sometimes you find yourself in a bit of a spiral that you end up buying more stuff, and it builds up, and it's quite easy to build up. And if you think that some of the lax policies on credit cards that have been allowed means that somebody who's earning 20,000 might have built up £10,000 in credit card, that's going to take crazy. A long time to pay off.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you're ending up, if it's a 30% interest rate, you're paying £3,000 a year on interest payments. So it's just knowing what you want and being able to, and understanding your biases on it and saying, well, do I really need that?
Okay.
And it's not to say that you can't have what you want, but sometimes there's more ways to look at it.
Yeah. Okay. So how would you go about advising someone who's like, an under 30, that they have something significant, be it they want to buy a house, or, I mean, we talked about millennials being kind of more experience based and wanting to do good, or you want to save money to go and travel around the world or set up a business, whatever it may be. What's the steps they should take to change their behaviour? Because like you said, it's kind of quite inbuilt in a whole generation.
Yeah. I think the first thing you need to do is understand yourself, which may sound a little bit flaky, but the best thing you can do actually is go through your past bank statements. That is your transactions, that is your history of what you've done and your decisions you do. And you separate that out into two things. You separate into the things that you have to spend your money on, rent, council tax, the bills, food, I guess, is an essential. And look at that, and then that's all your essential. Put that in a spreadsheet or write it all down, make a list, and you say that's what I'm spending a month on that side. And then you look at your discretionary spends, the stuff that you may not want to go out without, but you could if you absolutely had to. And then you can have a look at, analyze it yourself, and then you say, you'll know if you're spending too much money on something.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult because it is so easy just to not think about the example of getting a cup of coffee every day, £2.50, say, and it's suddenly you spent £12.50 in your working week and 50 quid a month on coffee, which sounds crazy, but it's really easy to be. And the same is maybe challenging. I don't know about you, but I don't often make the best decisions when I've had a few drinks. And certainly financial planning is probably not at the forefront of it. So one of the things is you could look at doing is, if you find that you're spending a lot of money when you're going out, is just taking cash out. And once it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah.
So there's those sort of ideas. So once and this idea is actually you don't need anyone else to tell you what to do. It's a lot better experience if you go through it and work out for yourself what you're comfortable with.
Yeah. And
it certainly shouldn't be right. That's my essential expenditure. All other expenditures are a waste of time. It's not, and you need to have that balance. And it's just saying, well, actually, do I need more than one takeaway a month, or is there a better use to that? And once you start doing that, and sometimes building in, everybody has big expenditure every year that might be a one-off, say that they want to spend some money on a holiday, or they know they're going to have to do some work on the car. There is the idea of just saving on a monthly basis for those big expenditures. So rather than putting it in the credit card and paying it off, you're paying it up front. Yeah.
The classic kind of just save every month, isn't it? That maybe we've lost sight of. And is that partly because, I guess you're saying maybe a thing that a lot of people would avoid, like you're saying, putting it in a spreadsheet and kind of going, right, what is essential, what's not? is maybe one of the challenges that is universal, is that having to deal with what you don't want to give up, but you know you should. And like I said, it's making yourself accountable, right? What is more important, a coffee every day or buying a house or being able to invest in, invest in your first business? Is it maybe that people kind of want to have it all rather than going, right, step back, what is important to me? And maybe money, the thing I like about the idea of kind of looking at your finances is it's plain, cold, hard facts, isn't it? And there's no escaping it. But personally, I guess sometimes that's why I maybe avoid looking at it, because I know there's no escaping it. So it's kind of I guess that changing relationship is an avoidance of that, because society and media tells us we can have it all, right?
Yeah. And I think as soon as you put it under a microscope, then you really understand actually what your relationship is with things. So you might say, well, I always love to have a curry on a Friday, but you realise that actually if you had it once a month, it would be almost more enjoyable than having it more often. And it's that difference there. So this law of diminishing returns, the more you have something, the less utility you get out of it. And it's once you can take control of that, then your stress levels will reduce. So one of the things that's not really talked about a lot is the amount of sort of mental strain that people have coming up to payday, trying to make all the bills match and feeling the pressure there. And there was a study that said that money worries, having significant money worries, was as draining as not having slept that night.
Wow.
So you see there's the pressure somebody on, and that's compounding then, because if you're under stress, you can't make good decisions. You compound your situation. You
spend lots of money on those coffees because you didn't sleep.
Coffees or leasing something like that is a lot more expensive than you need it to be.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of a huge subject from something that's so tangible and so real, and I think a lot of people think in its purest form, but I love this, how it does put that microscope on the various parts of your life. And
I think the thing I'd like people to try and is to take the fear away from money.
Okay.
So money owns a lot of people, and if you reverse that and you take ownership of it, by just doing a few simple rules, that's when you can start actually seeing that actually there is a way out, and there are simple things you can do, paying off debt regularly, reducing debt, and just being a little bit controlled even for a time makes a big difference.
Okay, that's really cool. Should we, I'm just looking at the time now, let's take a quick break now, and then maybe we'll come back, touch on that a bit more, of the emotional side of money and how we can take control both in a tangible way and in an emotional sense. We'll be back in a bit. Welcome back, part 3. Thank you for joining us. Okay, so Nathan, we touched on, didn't we, at the end of the last section, about this idea of fear. People have a lot of fear around money, fear of dealing with it, and maybe have that head in the sand kind of scenario going on. I guess what would be both the practical and the emotional advice that you'd give people to, you could say everyone knows, like the whole thing of everyone knows they should eat healthy and go to the gym, but they don't. What's the kind of, I guess, the thing with money that would allow people to go, right, you know what, I'm not going to burn my head in the sand, rip that plaster off and deal with it?
I think that's just knowing that if you can take ownership of it, then the stress you can only make a plan to get out once you know what your situation is. Yeah,
once what you're getting out of.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
hard to get out of a hole if you don't know what's around you in the dark, right?
Yeah, and I think that one of the things is that it can be quite a lonely experience because people don't like talking about money.
Yeah.
So if you start talking and say to your friends, "Oh, I'm really broke, I'm really struggling," it does sound quite like you want to borrow money or be given money, and that can be awkward. And all you really wanted to do is hear that it's pretty rubbish for everyone.
Yeah.
And everybody's struggles at times, an unexpected bill, Christmas overspend, all these things can really get people down.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, this might be a far-fetching kind of parallel to draw, but with the whole thing about, mental health kind of being something that's coming more to the forefront and people becoming more aware and encouraging people to talk about it. And we obviously mentioned in the last link about anxiety and kind of fear around money and people getting nervous, it being the equivalent of not sleeping. Do you think those are parallel in the people don't talk about mental health, but they're starting to, and people don't talk about money, and yet we're saying money can cause a lot of people a lot of stress?
Yeah.
I don't really know what my question here is in that, but is that a parallel you think we can draw, or is that maybe one step too far?
I think that is, and I think people are coming out a bit more, talking about some of the pressures that they're under. I think you're seeing, certainly we're in a point now where certainly if you've been getting support from the state, the cuts that have happened to support their benefits, etc., mean that it's getting harder and harder for people to manage on that, and that brings a lot of stress and anxiety.
Yeah.
So those stories are now coming out because you're starting to hear actually the numbers of what people are expected to be able to support themselves on, with no hope of any other sort of windfall.
Yeah. Is there a way, I mean, do you think, as you said, in the same way that there's lots of campaigns around speak out about mental health and it's okay to talk, should we be doing that with money? Not necessarily, like you said, there's the concern when you're talking to your friends, but should we be more open? Should we be encouraging people to talk about it more?
I think.
And if so, in what way? It's a tricky one.
I think we need to go back to grassroots with it first and foremost. I think you've got the problem is there's talk. I mean, there is constantly this idea of financial education coming into schools, and it's part of the curriculum now. But it's how do you get people to understand money when it's constantly evolving?
Yeah.
So sort of somebody 20, 30 years ago would see money as pound coins in their hand. These days we see it as a number on a screen. Somebody now, you might say, would rather look at it at Bitcoin. So this is constantly evolving, and I think we need to get people to understand the value of what money is and what it can do, and some of the problems involved with it.
Yeah.
In terms of helping people, they've got the Citizens Advice Bureau who do a fantastic job, and there are debt counselling services available. So there could always be more. But it does come down to, I guess, education and that ability for people to find good sources of knowledge. I guess like there's some online forums as well where you've seen Money Saving Expert. I think it's quite an interesting model because you do get a lot of people sharing experiences on there, and I think that's coming from a good place. I think being able to have somebody that can challenge the big companies and also point out where companies are doing a very good deal, that can only help, and I think will help the consumer. Yeah.
Do you think, I guess going back to your point about education and like that it's coming into the syllabus, but is there potentially a problem that it's very theoretical education, like this is how money works and this is what you should and shouldn't do, and ultimately it's kind of like if you're learning to play football and someone told you the theory of how to kick a football, you wouldn't actually be very good at it. Should there be maybe more of a, I mean, I remember at school, it wasn't until sixth form, but doing Young Enterprise and this whole idea of real world practice, and money is real. It's kind of this funny thing, isn't it? But it's about putting it into the real world and then seeing how stuff comes back and how all this sort of stuff. So I don't really know much about what they're putting in the syllabus at the moment, but is it theoretical or is there more practical stuff?
I think it's down to the schools to provide that financial education. So I agree that actually live examples and being able to go from school with a fair understanding of it is good. I think, bear in mind that I did a degree in finance. First term of university, I had a credit card. So I thought, this is brilliant. Beer tokens.
Yeah.
So I was up to my £500 limit within a month or two. And I hadn't set up a direct debit. They hadn't told me to. And I just assumed, they just add the interest on and I can forget about that for a few more months. It got taken off me rather quickly. And they're just like, you've got to pay that off. So, and I did. But it was quite a sobering lesson.
Yeah.
So it's the actual how these things work, whether it's credit cards. And the other thing is you can go the other way, is that everybody thinks credit cards are a really scary thing. If you've got a credit card and you pay the limit off every month, but you've shown that you can handle credit, that's one of the things that a mortgage company will look at when they're assessing you, that you've had experience of being able to handle credit.
Yeah.
So sometimes I come across people who go, my mum and dad told me never to have a credit card.
Yeah.
And that's generally good advice. It's coming from a good place, but it's almost saying, well, having a credit card but showing you are able to resist the temptation to smash it all on something is also quite a good thing to do.
Yeah, I guess that's the camp I definitely fall into, is like credit is bad, you shouldn't have it. But then, if I was to look at kind of getting credit for anything, it'd probably be quite tricky, like you said. And it's maybe, I guess, like you said, you'll probably say that's the generation that I'm kind of sitting in, but youngsters will be kind of in a different situation.
I know. I think a lot of young people have seen the problems involved with credit and don't like it. I just don't think not having credit's unusual.
Yeah.
Almost there's a fear of what they would do with it. But be aware that you can limit your credit.
Yeah.
And you can set it up so it's paid off monthly.
Yeah. I guess with this, we're kind of now seeing the other side, aren't we? We were talking about, when you can't help but spend money and you just kind of go crazy with it. And then the other side is fear about spending money, so you don't, and you restrict yourself maybe too much because there's this rigidity that, oh my God, credit is so bad, and fear before you've even, without any reason.
Yeah.
And then maybe you don't take the risks, you don't take those opportunities in life that you would like to. And interesting topic. Loads kind of to it, more than just those coins or anything like that. So we're gonna come to an end now, but what would you be like, maybe a couple of key takeaway tips that you'd give to people who want to regain and create a positive relationship? I guess I'm not going to say if they want to earn more money or get better at getting credit, but to improve their relationship with money, wherever they may be. Yeah,
I think that the main thing is get a good understanding of what your finances are, so what you're spending money on.
Yeah.
When it's basically when you're repaying debt or servicing credit cards, understanding the interest that it's costing you every month, and then almost making a plan of, well, if that was to go in 6 months to a year, so how much extra money would I have by having not spent that? So there's those sort of options, and having a clear idea of what you want to try and get to, and also maybe saving for things rather than funding them from credit and then repaying them. So
get more value from them, as you were saying.
Yeah, definitely. There's that. So it would just reduce stress.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Great stuff. Great tips. Nathan, thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank you. So thank you very much for tuning in to another edition of the Big Ideas Show today. Massive thank you to Nathan for joining us. Some really interesting ideas there, and something that's completely new for me. So hopefully you got something out there, and it'd be really interested to hear actually in the comments, like how you fit into those different genres, different age groups, and what your relationship to money is. I can definitely hear myself in certain ones of those. So a really interesting study. And as he said, at the end of the day, if you have the knowledge, you have the power. So start to make a track what you're doing, and then you have control. Even if you ignore it, at least you know. Okay, so big thank you to all the sponsors for helping to make this possible. We have Bullfish Glass Services, bespoke glass manufacturers based right here in Folkestone. We have QBH Solutions, HR and compliance advice that is real world, not making it complicated or boring or anything like that. Real world stuff. We have Meticulous Media, B2B content providers,
providing you the insight to be able to tell your story and helping you create that story. And of course, Go Monkey web app, who are for parents and grandparents to help them find, explore, and get out and about more, get those kids off of those Wi-Fi screens. Right. Thank you very much to them. Thank you very much to you for listening. Please like, subscribe, follow, the whole lot. We go out on SoundCloud, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, the whole lot. So love to hear your comments, and I'll see you next week for another edition of The Big Idea Show.